Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Hart Bennett, and today I'm going to read you chapter 17 from my second book, Seven Sisters, Overland. Dozens of saints, including Susanna and the twins, had already gone with their loved ones to the infirmary. The remaining sisters and Jane now made their way there. Inside were rows and rows of bodies on the floor, with townswomen nursing them, and men carrying the pronounced dead victims out to make room for those brought in. There were two doctors giving orders and treating the worst cases of broken bones, torn off limbs, and burns from the explosion. The wailing and moaning was heart-wrenching. Susanna got the still suffering twins in line to have their cuts looked at and bandaged. The other four began their search for Linda May. Lavinia walked around the edges of the warehouse, bouncing Lanny as she went. Eleanor and Caroline and Jane started going up and down the rows. Some of the casualties' faces were unrecognizable. It was Eleanor who first spotted a Linda May in the corner. "A Linda May!" she exclaimed, running to her. The other two followed. She knelt down, slipped her hand under Linda May's neck, and carefully lifted her head up so it could rest on her lap. Linda May was very weak and looked confused. By the looks of her clothing, she had been covered with debris from head to toe. With knitted brow, she studied Eleanor's face, trying hard to remember. "See if you can find some water and a cloth," Caroline ordered Eleanor as she began to move the strands of blood-soaked hair off Linda May's face. Then she cooed softly, "You're going to be all right, Linda May." Caroline quickly returned with a small basin of water and a cloth. Eleanor began to wash the dirt and blood off Linda May's face. "Where does it hurt?" Linda May didn't understand. She was having difficulty breathing, which caused her to cough. Eleanor raised her up a little. After her coughing subsided, something must have clicked in her mind because she became animated and started to look around. "Lanny, where's Lanny?" she questioned with fear in her eyes. Lavinia, who was on the other side of the large room, remarkably heard Lanny's name being called and turned around. She spotted the sisters gathered around Linda May and made a beeline toward them. "Linda May, you're alive!" Lavinia cried with relief as she knelt down beside her and carefully placed the baby in her arms. "Here's your precious Lanny." "Oh, my baby, she sobbed weakly, hugging and kissing Lanny. Then she lifted her eyes to heaven and said something in Danish, which sounded like a prayer of thanksgiving. In a moment of clarity, she looked into the faces gathered around her and exclaimed, "Sisters! 7 sisters!" The sisters smiled with unspeakable joy, and their hopes rose. Then Linda May gave a sharp groan and put her hand on her chest. She began to cough again and gasp for air. "Lavinia, take the baby again," Eleanor directed. The sisters watched as Eleanor raised Linda May up farther and lifted up her left arm in the air. This helped her get a breath. Her coughing lessened, but she had drifted back into a detached state. "Caroline, Jane," ordered Eleanor. "Stand up and spread your skirts out so no one can see. I want to examine her." They quickly obeyed. Eleanor carefully opened Linda May's bodice and gasped. All over her chest and rib cage was a dark, discolored bruise. "This is more serious than I thought, sisters," Eleanor said, knowing that Linda May couldn't understand her frank assessment. "She has had a blow from some huge piece of flying debris that has hit her very forcefully in the chest." Linda May began to moan eerily. "Go get the doctor, Caroline," said Eleanor desperately. I don't know what to do. Eleanor wanted to ask Linda May so many questions, but she knew she wouldn't understand anything, and if she did, she wouldn't be able to give any answers because of her limited English. Why did she leave the sleeping area? Where was she when the explosion occurred? Where are her injuries located? Eleanor's eyes began dripping. When Caroline arrived back with the doctor, he took over and checked Linda May's vital signs. Then he examined her wounds. Linda May began to slip in and out of consciousness. Eleanor patted her cheek. "Stay awake, Linda May. Stay awake." The doctor finally spoke. "Her pulse is very weak. These dark bruises suggest internal bleeding from the impact of something that knocked the breath right out of her and literally collapsed her lungs. I'm very sorry, but There is nothing more I can do for her. Prayer is your only hope." The sisters stared at each other in disbelief as the doctor departed. They had already said dozens of prayers to help them find Alinda May. Now they pleaded with the Lord for her life. She started to stir. "Caroline," she murmured softly. Caroline was surprised that Alinda May called for her. She leaned forward so she could hear her better. Alinda May whispered, "Silver, in petticoat, for Lanny." Caroline remembered the silver pieces Alinda May had given her at Castle Garden so she could pay the tariff on the Wedgwood dishes Nan had given her before she left England. Now she knew where Alinda May had gotten them. "Yes," is all Caroline could manage to say through her sobs. Alinda May called for Lanny again, and Lavinia placed him beside her. She smiled lovingly at him and caressed his face. "Goodbye, remarkable boy. I'm going to see Papa." Then she looked around the circle of sisters until her eyes fell on Jane. "Jane," she whispered. Jane came closer and knelt down. "What is it?" "You take Lanny. Be moder, please." Jane was overcome. Her shoulders began to shake, and she broke down in sobs. Then, trying to compose herself, she touched Alinda May's hand. "You'll be all right, won't you, Alinda May?" Then she turned to Eleanor. "Won't she, Eleanor?" Eleanor looked at Jane, and with brimming eyes and the slightest shake of her head, she conveyed that Alinda May was not going to make it. Alinda May seemed at peace. She drew Lanny up to her lips and kissed him softly. "Sing lullaby, Jane," she said. Jane had a lump in her throat that was hurting so badly she knew she couldn't sing. "I want to hear once more," whispered Alinda May. Jane felt a wave of calm spread over her. And with renewed composure and tears in her voice, she began to sing the Danish lullaby. "I went to the window one morning in spring. A sweet little robin came there to sing. The song that she sang was sweeter by far than ever was heard on the flute or guitar." Then with their heads bowed, tears streamed down each sister's face. They couldn't see through all their tears. "I rocked my wee babe as the birdie sang on. He drifted to sleep with nary a yawn. Together the robin I finished the song. Then she flew out of sight, back to where she belonged." Sorry about that. When Jane finished her song, the sisters gradually looked up, only to see that their dear, sweet Alinda May had passed beyond the veil. She lay there peacefully, with Lanny asleep in her arms. Her face had a faint smile on it. She looked so serene. After a few moments of letting the spirit envelop them all, Eleanor picked up Lanny and tenderly placed him in Jane's arms. Jane was immediately transported to another place. The love she felt for her dear mother and little Brigham was suddenly multiplied tenfold. And now Lanny would be the recipient of this inexpressible love. Eleanor walked away from her sisters, heaving big sighs of frustration. She felt vacant, lost, abandoned. She couldn't control her emotions any longer. She was angry. She had worked so hard to keep Alinda May healthy on the trip. She had prayed constantly for the safe delivery of Lanny. And now Alinda May had been snatched away from her son in an accident that was caused by the negligence of a captain and crew trying to win a foolish wager. How could God be so cruel to take Lanny's father just before he was born and her mother just afterward, leaving him to be raised by strangers? She was overcome with a flood of tears. "Sister Wise, I just heard." "I'm so sorry," said President Tippett as he walked toward her with his arms outstretched. She didn't hesitate but walked into them to be comforted. "I know you must be feeling like this was your fault.
that Linda May died, but please believe me, the Lord has a grand design, and He knows the end from the beginning. He will bless everyone involved in this senseless tragedy if they will but place their trust in Him. I know, Eleanor finally said, stepping back and wiping her eyes. It's just hard to see families shattered like this. First, Jane's mother dies on the ship, then little Brigham. Two from the same family within 2 weeks of each other. It's so difficult to have to go through all that again with Linda May. But think of the blessing this is going to be for Brother and Sister Clotworthy. They lost their son, and now they have a chance to raise Linda May's son. This will do more to stabilize Sister Clotworthy than anything else right now. We couldn't have asked for a better outcome to this heartbreaking story. Eleanor pondered this and then spoke. Thank you, President, she said, shaking his hand. You are so level-headed. You always know what to say to ease my pain. Now I need to roll up my sleeves and offer my help to the doctors. That's what I came to talk to you about, Sister Wise. I want you and your sisters to go on the Isabel to Omaha. Eleanor began to protest, but he cut her off. There are hundreds of women from Lexington helping with the dead and wounded. They won't need you. Trust me, I will stay here with President Smoot and some of the other priesthood holders to make sure our dead are taken care of and our wounded are doctored and administered to. But I need to help, President. The best way you can help is to go with the other saints on board the Isabel and tend to their emotional needs resulting from losing loved ones and friends. There will be plenty of saints with cuts and scrapes that will need your nursing skills as well. But what about Linda May? We'll see to it that she is laid to rest in a proper grave. I got word that the town fathers have already donated a piece of land north of the cemetery, especially for burying the dead of the Saluda. The people here are so wonderful, said Eleanor. It's unbelievable, President Tippett agreed. Missourians have always been hostile to Mormons, but the citizens of Lexington seem to be atoning for Missouri's past treachery toward us with their unselfish acts of brotherly love. Eleanor was now crying in gratitude. Sister Wise, take Sister Clotworthy, the baby, and your sisters down to the Isabel. That is the right place for you now. I'll do it, President. When will you join our company again? I think I can safely say we will be here until all the saints are accounted for and taken care of. Godspeed then, President, she said, shaking his hand with both of hers. Eleanor returned to her sisters, who were still kneeling around Linda May. Caroline had, in the meantime, extracted 27 silver pieces from the hemline of Linda May's petticoat and presented them to Jane, who was so overwhelmed that she couldn't even utter a thank you. Come along, sisters. We need to fetch Susanna and the twins and go to the Isabel to see what we can do to help there. Presidents Tippett and Smoot, and a few other men will stay here for as many days as it takes to oversee the care of the dead, the wounded, and our dear Linda May. Eleanor could see her sisters were devastated over the loss of Linda May, but she knew they needed to forge on, so she continued giving orders. Lavinia, I want you to make a list of all the saints who are going on the Isabel so I can give it to President Tippett before we leave. Caroline, you and I will examine everyone for unseen injuries. We've got our work cut out for us, sisters. That's the end of chapter 17. Kind of a sad chapter. I'm sorry, it always makes me cry. I get so attached to my characters. Anyway, over and out.